you're doing this so that you can ultimately be happier. And in fact, even if it wasn't your choice to separate to begin with, ultimately, if you're no longer with someone who doesn't want to be with you, still your life can and will be better as long as you allow that opening.
Welcome to the Thriving After Divorce podcast, where you learn the secrets to reclaim your life and turn your breakup into your breakthrough. Transformation expert, internationally published author, and online show host Tanya Marie Dubé will help you quickly pick up and move on as you tune into interviews with some pretty cool experts from around the world, showing you how to live your best life after divorce. If you're ready to learn the skills to finally put your divorce behind you for good, dig down really deep, and step into your highest self, then you're in the right place. Here's your host, online educator and mom of two, Tanya Marie Dubé.
Hi, everybody. You are listening to Thriving After Divorce Radio podcast. I am your host, Tanya Marie Dubé. Thank you so much for coming back here on Monday morning with me. I am thrilled that we get to share this space again. I want to quickly remind everybody to please like, share, review, and comment on this podcast. I would love to know what you think. I would love to know what you need more of. I'm watching everybody's comments. I'm responding to as much stuff as I can, as quickly as I can, and I'm loving it. So if you're feeling this podcast and you think it could be useful and helpful to anybody you may know, please do share it. This is really important. We have this goal together of reaching 1 million women. So the only way we can do that is if we share and we review and we make comments and do all that fun stuff. So today, I'm really excited to bring you Gabrielle Hartley. She is a leading divorce attorney, a mediator, a coach, an author, and a speaker. Her new book, Better Apart, The Radically Positive Way to Separate by HarperCollins, is the first book of its kind to combine the life-changing healing wisdom of mindfulness, meditation, and yoga with practical advice and legal wisdom to get the reader through and beyond the divorce. So, I love this episode so much. We are talking about what needs to be done in ourselves so that we can avoid court if possible. And even when things are contentious, she empowers us with ways to think so that we can encourage love and transformation in the most toxic of relationships. So Gabrielle is honest and she tells it like it is. She's funny and she truly, truly wants you to succeed. We talk about her book, which is getting so much attention, Better Apart, and the tenets, which are the backbone of the book, as well as techniques to bring you back to a safe place when you're overwhelmed, you can't sleep, you can't think, and your anxiety is off the chart. So we also get into parenting plans, what to look for in a lawyer, and why forgiveness is everything. So let's welcome Gabrielle. Hi, Gabrielle. I am so absolutely thrilled to have you here. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I love your book. Let's just start there. I am absolutely loving Gabrielle's book. It's called Better Apart. Everybody who's going through a divorce should read it. I want to start with you, Gabrielle, on your why. Why did you choose family law and what motivated you to write this amazing book?
Oh my gosh, that is such a great question. So I grew up in a family where my parents separated and divorced when I was 9 and my brother was 6. And they had a really, really good divorce. And that might sound like oxymoronic. But by the time I was going to law school, the last thing I ever wanted to do was to be a family lawyer. And in fact, I took family law, which was required, pass, fail. And one thing led to another. And I wound up working for the chief administrative judge currently who was at the time sitting on Staten Island and Brooklyn in New York City. And I wound up working and resolving hundreds and hundreds of trial-ready divorce cases. So the whole time I was growing up, my parents were practically braggy about how amazing their divorce was, but I didn't necessarily think it was. Like I said, I didn't even want to take family law. Yeah. And then when I worked in the court, I saw really how bad divorce could be. And I, first of all, was so grateful for how well my parents handled things. And I also, that made me had a lot of reflection on all the negative messaging that I had received throughout my life. And I wanted to really further spread and disseminate the message that there is a better way. And it's really my core belief set and my mission to sort of smash the stigma. I can't tell you how many people, referred to my household as like a broken home. And that was so offensive to me at that time. And today, unfortunately, it's still viewed that way by many, many people, when I would prefer that we start thinking of it as like a transformed home. It's not broken, because that's like telling your child that their life is broken. And what kind of messaging is that to say?
I agree. Absolutely. I absolutely love your take on that. Now, what got you to write this book? Because it's phenomenal, and we'll go into all the reasons why.
Well, I have been in private practice in New York City and in Massachusetts for about 25 years as a lawyer and mediator. And, for the last probably 10 to 15 years, I'm sitting across from people and I know how alone they feel. And, like, are they ever going to feel better, and questioning what their life is going to be, and all the flood of emotion. And so many times I have wanted to introduce people to each other, form a support group, or like spread the message far and wide that you're doing this so that you can ultimately be happier. And in fact, even if it wasn't your choice to separate to begin with, ultimately, if you're no longer with someone who doesn't want to be with you, still your life can and will be better as long as you allow that opening. And you, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and through that, you came up with these 5 very important ways of looking at your divorce and going through it, which you outline in your book.
Yeah, so through the framework, and the book is very carefully curated through the framework, so there's 5 essential elements is what I have called them through the years, and they are patience, respect, clarity, peace, and forgiveness. And they're all about you. And each of these elements, when you work on them, whichever one speaks to you the most is the one I would tell the reader or anybody in my coaching program to work with, is you drill down on developing that practice for yourself to help you move forward. And one that people often get stuck on is forgiveness. And my greatest message is a quote, which is, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And think about that for a second, right? So the first thing you need to do is forgive yourself for not being able to forgive, and making that a conscious affirmation. Like, I forgive myself for having a hard time to forgive. And then maybe forgive the other person for not being able to acknowledge their wrongdoing, if that's your circumstance, and from there, just the naming of what's going on will start to shift your energy.
Oh my gosh, it's such a difficult thing to put into practice, only if I find your ego is sitting front and center before anything else. So, having been the recipient of a lot of bad behavior throughout my life from various men, if we're just talking about romantic relationships, the ego wants to say, how dare you, and who are you? And you need them to name it and say they're sorry. And you need to feel some kind of validation that, hello, I'm a human being. You had no right to do this to me. And then, but if that's what we're coming at forgiveness with, we're never going to be able to get to the other side of that, which is
right.
Yeah, which is what we really ultimately want, is peace.
Right. And so forgiveness, what we also want is like emotional freedom. And so by compassion for ourselves, for the fact that we're human and that we have like depth of emotion, that's how we can start allowing ourselves emotional freedom to feel again, to move forward again, to open our hearts again. I know that might all sound kind of like woo-woo, but it is all true. Like when we've been hurt, it's like once burnt, twice burnt, once shy. I don't know. I'm never good at those.
No, you got it.
Do you know what I mean? Like when something happens that wounds you, it's like really hard to open up your emotional self again. And so you have to acknowledge the hurt. It's funny, that Pixar movie Frozen, that song, Let It Go. Is that
Let It Go? Yes.
Yeah, that song is like, the reason it was such a global sensation is it really resonated with people,
Yes. Also, I just wanted to say too that every relationship is so different. And I think that when we don't heal from the trauma and the pain of a past relationship, when we're going through something difficult now with somebody new, it's really easy to clump that person into all of the relationships you've ever had, right? Like,
true that.
Yeah.
Say it again, sister. Like, you don't have to actually, but like, that's exactly right. When we don't address what has happened in our past relationships, be it with a romantic partner, with our parents, like we are just programmed to repeat this, if not in the exact same pattern, something quite similar. And so putting the work in at the front end will enable you to create a new pathway, you know, because our brains can change, but there's work involved.
Yes. And this is absolutely why I love your book, is because self-love is so important. And for so many of us, we haven't been taught that in our fundamental, like who we actually are as people. We haven't been taught to pay attention to that. This book guides you through that in the most thoughtful way imaginable. Now, you said earlier that it's, you know, each person will take, you know, they'll just jump right in the space that they feel they need the most help. And I just did that. So I jumped right into patience, because this is something I'm lacking in life.
Me too. That's why it was the first chapter, because I realized as I was getting a lot of feedback, you know, like, oh, well, isn't forgiveness the hardest part? I was like, you know, I'm like naturally super forgiving. That's not that hard for me, but I'm wicked impatient. Like patience is just really, really my growth spot. So that, you know, so I hear you.
And I found, so can I just say what I love about that section specifically? I love the mantras that you have in that really grounded me. I love the self-work that you do with our own bodies and our breathing inside of that. I love that you give examples of how to think and what your language should be in your head and out of your mouth and your physical body, even when you're dealing with someone who's making things up about you that are not true. And I was going through the whole thing. I needed to read this entire thing right before I headed into court, right? So that was phenomenal for me. And so now I cannot wait to devour the rest of this book.
I know. And I like to say, like as a mantra, I say I am radiantly calm, because I'm not radiantly calm. So it's really powerful. I practice yoga on average, say 4 times a week. And so I spend the hour to an hour and a half literally breathing in and out. I am radiantly calm. I am radiantly calm. And does it mean that I'm suddenly like the Buddha? No, but it makes me a little calmer, you know? And
yeah. And you want to know what the extra thing that helped me with the mantra?
Yes, of course I do.
You said in this section to, you know, one of the things to ground you is to sit comfortably and calmly and to put one hand on your heart and the other hand on top of that hand, I believe, while you're saying the mantra, or at least that's how I did it. And I loved that because it made me feel myself in my body while I was thinking this very peaceful thing, right?
Oh, so Elena Brower, she's like a world-renowned yoga and meditation expert. And so she contributed the physical movements throughout the book. So I just wanted to give a little shout out to her. Yeah, that's a really wonderful exercise that she put in there. And it's extremely grounding.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Elena. That's amazing. I can't get enough of this book. I wanted to shift a little bit now. I wanted to ask you something about litigation. So how you and I had talked a little bit briefly before we had, got into this interview. I wanted to know, how should you try to remain out of court, and how do you not freak out if litigation proves necessary?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great question. And that's really relevant for, unfortunately, thousands and thousands of people. So, so if you're tuning into this and you have, friends or relatives dealing, the first thing that I would say is to take a big step back and to not assume that you need a judge to decide your life. Okay, so that's like the first thing. And if you and your spouse can get on that same page, that's wonderful, because, there is no magic serum. There is no pot of gold. It's just a person who went through a certain course, who became, a course of meaning career, who either is appointed or elected to become a judge. But that person is not a computer. That person is going to see your life through a particular lens and using the law as a guide, they're going to say what the parenting plan is going to be or how the money should be split. And what they come up with may not reflect what either of you want. And that's just the reality. Now, that doesn't miss it. So what you can do is hire a mediator and also have a lawyer first to learn what your rights are, because you can make the best agreements when you're doing the agreement from a place of knowledge formed. So for instance, I am mediating with a family where they live in Georgia, and I'm not a lawyer in Georgia. I don't know what the law is, and I'm never going to counsel anyone I'm mediating with anyway as to the law, but I've had both of the parties go and seek counsel so that they know what their respective rights are. And then we have our mediations online and we come up with a memorandum of understanding that they bring back to the lawyer to create an agreement. So you may not be able to do that. You might be dealing with someone who is so difficult and you really can't negotiate with a terrorist. It's just not an option. And if that is your situation, the biggest thing you can do is to accept the things you cannot change, right? So forgive yourself, engage in whichever of the practices speak the most to you, breathe through it, always keep your mind's eye positive, because sometimes you'll be surprised when the terrorist is running out of money, they too may begin to negotiate. You'd be surprised. Oftentimes who are at mediation who then wind up in litigation have a sense of peace, knowing that they did all that they could within their power to keep things at the negotiation table. And sometimes the universe or God or whatever, higher power you may or may not believe in takes over. And then that's okay too, because you've done all you can do. So my advice is to know who you're dealing with and then make the best decisions that you can under the circumstances, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all scenario.
I love that. I love the terrorist part.
I don't know if you love or hate that, but it's really true. I mean, I right now have been in a case with somebody who is trying really hard to sit at the negotiating table, but that person's spouse really won't engage, so they need to head into court, and that's unfortunate, but that's what litigation counsel is for.
And it's off, I honestly, if I could have kept all of this out of court, I absolutely would have. I don't like it, to be perfectly, if I can be frank, because I'm in it right now, I really don't love this. I don't love the idea of putting putting all of these decisions in the hands of someone who doesn't know me. But isn't it kind of funny? We've been going enough now that I kind of feel like we know each other, the judge. And us, and we keep seeing the same judge over and over again. And I think, honestly, to be perfectly honest, I think we got lucky with him because he's very kind and just. But if anybody is asking me, I would say do everything you can to stay out of court. I really don't like it. I don't think it's a good place for people to be.
But you're there because you have to be.
But you're there because you have to be.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's hard is, in order to prevail in court, unfortunately, you often have to take a very offensive approach.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be difficult to reconcile the rumble of to take Brene Brown's word, right, of taking the offensive approach and at the same time really viewing this as being the best you, right? And having their dynamic be better. But you really need to protect yourself and protect your children, and always keep your mind's eye at engaging with this process in such a way that when you look back on your life in 5 years, you feel proud of how you handled yourself. And I believe that if you have done all that you could possibly do to do things the easy way, you might just have to do things with the hard way. And that's okay. It's like we say that to our kids all the time. You have a choice. We can do it this way or that way. You decide. And as long as you're doing all you can to do it the quote unquote easy way, if the other person will not cooperate or cannot cooperate because of some sort of emotional, mental, issue, then you just need to take things forward, and you need to be as kind to yourself and to your kids and to your ex as you can be, given the facts and circumstances at hand.
And this is exactly what your book is all about.
That's right. And the book is really infused with the practices. So it's not just like, you should do this, you should do that. It's like, here's something you can do to handle this or that. And we try to, after I go through the 5 elements, I address different approaches to court or not to court, different approaches to your divorce. I address how to handle finances. There's an entire chapter devoted to parenting. And then there's a whole bunch of after divorce, how do we reboot? How do we handle things that come up, graduations, birthday parties, new paramours, all different things like that. And so, there's work along the way, but that's okay. This is just all, your life's journey. And, we're all on a different journey. It's just some of our journeys are more obvious to the outside world to see, and some people's are more hidden, but everyone's got their stuff. So just remember that when you're feeling sort of, if shame is coming over you, or the sense of like stigma that still exists a lot around divorce, just remember that you're okay and your kids are going to be okay, and you just take it. If you can't take it one day at a time, you take it one moment at a time.
And what really helps me too is the realization and the understanding that sometimes the thoughts that are going around in my head are not real. They're assumptions, and jumping into too much of something that I don't know anything about or I don't have any control over. And so I remind myself that this is not forever. This is just
that's right. Your present circumstances are not reflective of your entire life. Number one, really big point. And number two, the stories in our mind are just stories. So who we are is not made up of the facts and circumstances of what's happening to us now, nor are we made up of all the external things we have, the bling we have or don't have, the car we have or don't have, the education we have or don't have. It's who we are is truly made up of what messaging we're sending ourselves. And that's why the positive affirmations are so important, because especially when you're going through this kind of experience, you want to be sending yourself positive messages, because words have power. And the more we repeat positive, uplifted messages to ourselves, the more that is what we are and who we are.
Oh my gosh, I love it. This is exactly right. Now, this is a really great segue into my next question, which is, how can we change that internal narrative when we're so stuck on, this is what he did to me, or this is what has happened, or he's trying to ruin my life. I hear that a lot. How do we get out of that internal narrative? Because this is what's keeping us stuck, I believe.
Okay. So that is for me, that's like a really exciting topic. I don't know if that's exciting. So all of us, well, most of us get into this blame game thing, right? We get into the he this, she that, and we just waste so much of our precious time here on this earth talking about the other person's stuff, right? But like, what if we devoted a nice bit of our energy on visualizing what we want, engaging in a deep visualization practice until the visualization is internalized, right? Because when we visualize something with the greatest detail, so you get really specific, you keep it really positive, right? And you talk to yourself as though things are happening in the present, and you get as granular as you can about it. Your energy and your attention is going to be focused more on that and less on the bad stuff. So, for instance, we had a flood in our house earlier this year, and we had a contractor who came who basically stole our money, right? He came in, he did half the job, and he left with thousands of dollars.
Wow.
Now, it's not like I have thousands of dollars to just hand off to somebody, but I thought long and hard about it. And the fact of the matter is, at this point, I have so much positive stuff going on that for me to spend my mental and emotional energy chasing after this person who probably, is judgment proof or, has their own really terrible baggage is such a waste of my positive energy on something so negative. So like, I don't want to waste my time dealing with negativity. I'm very clear about that. And since I made that shift for myself, it has completely turned my life around. Not
You
that
know
my life
what?
was bad before, but
Yeah.
I've always been like fundamentally a happy person. But I think that I, just like most people who aren't thinking about being positive all the time, or, I could get down a rabbit hole and start to like hyper focus on the negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that just doesn't bring us any joy.
And you're also picking your battles too, and you're understanding where gratitude lies in your life and where to put the focus. I love that. I wanted to ask you now, I love the idea about the visualization, what you just said, and bringing everything into the present moment. So do you want to share what that language would look like for someone who's heavy into the divorce right now, can't sleep, has tons of anxiety? What should they be saying to themselves to do that?
So I would hesitate to tell you exactly what to say, but I can give you some suggestions. Like,
Sure.
I can only control this moment.
Mm-hmm.
This moment is not reflective of me, of my life, of my future. You may just say, I'm radiantly calm. I love that. I mean, for me, that's so powerful. That's the thing. Like, it's so personal, but something that's really short and sweet and specific. And when you say it, also focus on your breathing. In through your nose for a count of 3, then hold it, and then out through your mouth for a count of 5. And do this daily, not just when you're upset, but like, make it a practice, because when you do something regularly, it becomes a habit. And then when you're triggered, it'll be automatic, and you won't have to be like, oh, I think I should do my patience mantra right now, because you're just in the habit of doing it, right? And so when you do your mantra and your breathing, or if you don't like the word mantra, your affirmation, whatever, if mantra's too, whatever, hippie. What I would say is to remember that our minds can only focus on one thought at a time. And so if you just focus on the breathing or just focus on the mantra, you can't focus on the other stuff. And so that should be able to settle you and help you to, if not sleep, at least clear your mind so that your body can enter a space of rest and relaxation. And so like in my coaching masterclass that will be launching soon, I basically take the participants through the book on a very basic, simple level, because it's really hard, unless you're very disciplined, like it sounds like you are, to like actually engage with the book. And if you're not very lexic, if you don't like read, and so I'm trying to deliver this content in as many ways as possible, so it's really digestible for people.
I also wanted to say, to the point that you made about talking about things like they are in the present, the way that I do this for myself is I write out what my goals are, so I give myself something to focus on. So I'm not focusing on the negative stuff. I'm going to focus now on my own personal journey and what I want for myself. In this space is where I talk about it like it's already existing.
Exactly.
I talk about how I'm a millionaire 10 times a day.
Right.
That sort of thing. To be perfectly honest, I talk about what my relationship with my ex looks like now, even though it's not happening yet. I talk about the kind of life my children are going to have and where they're going to be, even though they're not quite there yet. Like they're not.
This is great. You should do, your listener should do exactly what you're doing. That is like, it is so powerful. Keep going.
I love it. Okay. That's fantastic. I love that you love that.
No, I really love it. I'm going to tell you something. So when I had this vague idea, like I need to write a positive divorce book. That was sort of like, a thought I had in my mind ever since I started, when I finished working for the judge. And when Gwyneth Paltrow said that she had a conscious uncoupling, I said to my husband, I'm like, I am writing the conscious uncoupling guidebook, and Gwyneth Paltrow is going to endorse it, and it is going to be a global sensation and totally change my entire career path in a really amazing way, and I'm going to help millions and millions of people. My husband was like, go back to sleep, Gabrielle. So I was very clear, and the book is doing well. It's not quite yet a global sensation.
It will be.
And I have the fact that I have Gwyneth's endorsement is so powerful, not just because it's Gwyneth's, but it's because to the point of visualizing.
Amazing. I can't, there's so much power in, and I think you're going to have to tell me if you know the science behind this, because I really don't, but I know that we have between 35 and 55,000 random thoughts a day. And unless you focus very specifically on very, specific things that you want, that will become habits ultimately, like brushing your teeth. We don't really even need to think about that anymore, but we do it. We do it because we know we have to do it. We do it because we don't want our teeth to fall out, basically. So when we stop and we visualize what it is that we want for ourselves, whether you're doing it in a positive way or a negative way, you will manifest that. That will happen.
Right. I cannot tell you the science behind that either, but it is just so true. I mean, to be honest, I have so many examples in my life. Now, my husband is a scientist, right? So, like, he might say, well, he'll argue against what I'm saying, but the fact of the matter is that there are such clear, weird things that I've manifested by being absolutely specific. In fact, marrying him. My first date, I thought I'm marrying him, and I did. Like, I don't know if he knew that, and I don't, whatever. But like, that's funny, right? But there is just something really powerful about being very clear in what you want in your life, whether it be money or achieving a certain thing or living in a certain place. You'll just think I'm like so crazy if I tell you some of the things that I've done, but I wanted to have a third child, and I made like little altars of pictures of 3 kids.
Aww.
And I mean, there's so many things.
I don't think that's crazy at all. Let me just say, I am like the girl who grew up doing vision boards whenever I could.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah, totally.
So, and I'm glad you brought up vision boards, by the way, because I tend to do lists. Like I am the girl with like 8,000 diaries from when I was in my, teens and 20s, full of like manifestation lists. I didn't call it that then, but that, I had things I like, things I hate, things I want, things I dislike. I mean, like I was categorizing and like clarifying things I learned from my relationships. I made a list of like everyone I ever dated and what the one good takeaway was and the one bad takeaway was from everyone. And when I was single, this is like really crazy. I made a really, really specific list. I was a bridesmaid like 15 times. I made a really specific list of like the qualities I wanted in a husband. And from the date that I started to make the list to the day that I met my husband, it was under 6 months. And I will say that number one, it was like pretty much a mantra. Like I would come home from these crazy dates, that were like, ugh, whatever. And I would read the list. I'd feel like this is happening. And now, does that mean that everything is perfect? No, it doesn't, because because I left out some things. I think that's really bad. I'm like, oh, I should have thought of that. But I did the best I could, and like, there's that expression, "Be careful what you wish for." So,
I was just thinking that. I was thinking now I finally know what my grandmother meant when she said, "Be careful what you wish for."
Yes. So that is something to really visualize clearly and carefully.
I have to be perfectly honest with you, and I think I may have shared this with you the other day, but I did that too. When I first started to date again, of course you want the exact opposite of the nightmare you just went through. So I would say very specific things, and then funny enough, they would show up, but they were lacking things. Like I forgot to say, but he has to really like me.
Right.
And
that's really funny.
Right. And then the next time I would make the list, I would, now I'd be able to tweak it and shape it. And it was almost like I was creating my man from scratch, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's what I felt like also. And wasn't it like kind of fun?
Yeah, it was totally fun. And it was awesome to see how my thoughts and my ideas were actually coming to life. Like it was amazing to me. It was powerful and it was fantastic. And now I'm with the man of my dreams. But it took trial and error, and it took trying, you have to put yourself out there and you have to believe that you deserve this.
That's right. And whatever it is.
Yeah.
I still sometimes think about like health, right? Can we decide we're not going to have some kind of illness? And people say that you can. And I think that with certain illnesses, positivity may not completely beat the illness, but it can prolong your life, and it can also promote feeling good when you are alive. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And your husband would probably hate that I'm about to say this, but I do believe that the visualization when you are sick or unhealthy, the visualization of you beating the disease or you knowing, seeing yourself as perfectly healthy, doing that 10, 15 times a day can actually reverse the disease, I think.
Yeah, he would hate that. But I
know
think
he would
there's
hate
just so much power in our minds. We have a lot of ability to manifest. And, that's what I'm really very passionate about, is like helping people to transcend and move forward from adversity and recognize that you have so much power within you, so much agency.
Oh, it's amazing. And you and I are on the same page, and this is why we became fast friends.
Totally.
Now, in your book, you recommend that people who are going through a divorce should slow down. So how do you slow down when what you want is for just to be over?
Yeah, so that's really hard. That goes right to patience, right?
Yeah.
And so one thing to do is to just remind yourself that this is a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Just like say that to yourself. I'm in a marathon. And I mean, just the recognition, just the noticing is a really big deal, right? And so, especially if you're leaving someone who is extremely difficult, the marathon might last for 22 years. It's like living with cancer, right? Like you have to just figure out a way to feel good while this bad thing is just there, right? And that's not easy. So even just noticing that you have to deal with it, and maybe grieving, right? Maybe go through the grief of like, why me? Why do I have to deal with this? What, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think too, that understanding what you're dealing with, see, all of the things inside of your book speak to how to slow down, right? Like if we're going to talk about, we just talked about patience. We're going to talk about respect. We're going to talk what you were saying about, 5 years from now, I want to look back on this and see that I did my best, that I showed up the best way I possibly could, that I was taking care of myself. My mindset was right on par. We're talking about clarity. We know what we're dealing with. We know what we want. All of these things contribute to being able to slow down, because now you're not working off of the assumptions in your head.
That's right. And also now you're not combating this person that you have no power over. You only have power over yourself. I mean, I know most of us know this from when we grew up, if our parents didn't tell us, but the reality is, rather than looking at it as I only have power over myself, how about reframing and saying I have power over myself, and my words and actions impact the world around me. And because they do. Because if you're no longer engaging in a pointless argument cycle, guess what happens? The cycle is going to subside because the other person is no longer getting the feedback that they're looking for. Yes,
that's it exactly. Especially with toxic relationships, they sort of feed off of that, right?
Especially, and there's so much like narcissism. There's so many issues that I hear over and over and over again. And just against your listeners, just know you're not alone, and slowly and mindfully you can shift the way you view yourself. You can change your relationship with yourself, and doing that will begin to change your relationship with the world around you.
Oh my gosh, can I say one thing on that? This is one thing that I absolutely need for my own personal life, is to have a plan. And I'm a pen to paper kind of girl. So however you want to do it, for anybody listening, this is what I've done. I've decided that whatever I know my triggers. I know what could send me flying into a craziness, right? Into like a rage. Well, not a rage, but a rage.
Don't say that online.
Yeah. No, but I know what can get me crazy and what can get me going. And so I make a list of these triggers, and then I say how I would normally react to them, because I know my own behavior. And then I put beside it how I want to behave, like how I want to react and come out of this. And then the trick is just in teaching yourself to just not be reactionary when something happens. Take 10 deep breaths, go look at this list that you just made, because you're going to have it laminated on the wall somewhere, and you're going to look for the thing that's happening to you right now. And then you're going to see the outcome. How you really feel in the moment is kind of crazy. And then what you're going to do is you're going to look at what you wish, how you could behave in that situation. And then you just do that.
So that's actually an exercise right from my book. I don't know if you did it already.
No,
yeah.
I'm so happy, because this is, for me personally, this was the only way that I could transition out of my habitual bad behavior. And I only call it bad.
rather than bad behavior, maybe we can think of it as turning reactivity into responsiveness.
Yeah, that's
a nice reframe where you're not, self-flagellating, because that's not going to help you either, right?
Well, and I was saying the reason I was calling it bad behavior is because it was getting me a result that I didn't want. Right. So if that's the outcome, is that I want a peaceful result and I want to be able to rise above and be my best self, then I need to know how. I like basically what I needed was a coach to tell me and be with me all the time to say, don't act like this, don't react like this. You said you didn't want to do this. So this is why I created this document for myself.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing document. I mean, that is really, really, it's a powerful exercise that I would highly encourage people to do.
Oh my gosh, I can't even believe that's in your book. That's fantastic.
It is in my book. Yeah.
I've been teaching that for a while now. I think that's fantastic, and it really does work. I love it.
It really does work. It's crazy.
So now let me ask you this. How do you avoid reacting and remaining respectful to your ex through all of the high tension situations involved in a divorce?
Okay, so remember that you are being respectful to yourself. You are behaving in the way that you want to behave. It really doesn't have anything to do with the other person, right? So remember that most of what comes at you has nothing to do with you. So if the person is really argumentative or aggressive, that person probably has a whole negative dialogue, bad beliefs about themselves, or has whatever their issues are. Like it's all sort of irrelevant for you. You don't need to step in the role of their analyst. But for you, what you need to do is just decide to behave in such a way that you want to behave, and engaging in those peace practices, like when you're feeling really triggered, to just do your breathing. Just take 10 deep breaths in and out of your nose. Say you want a time out. Many times we go for the bait in conversations that we really don't need to engage in. We can say, so that the person doesn't keep coming at us, say, I'm feeling a little triggered now. Maybe, if that's comfortable. Let's talk about this again in an hour, or I'll email you. Now, when you email someone, my recommendation is you don't send the email out right away. You sit on that email for a while, and you maybe even sleep on it, and you allow yourself to process whatever it is that you're going to say, because words have power, and the negativity that comes from you is highly likely to come back at you if the other person hasn't done a lot of deep work on themselves as well.
That's really good. And again, that could, you could go back to that list you just made and make sure that make sure that your email is reflective of where you want to be, not where you feel you are stuck, right?
Exactly.
Now, what are the most important keys to consider when putting together a parenting plan?
Oh, gee. Okay. Well, so yeah, I think in the book there's like 8 considerations or something, but basically the first thing to remember is that there is no one size fits all parenting plan. Every family is different. Every child is different. Every dynamic is different. So you need to know yourself. You need to know your ex. You need to know your child, your children. And you need to realize that the judge is just going to do something that's clear and enforceable. They're not going to get into the nuance. So take time to consider everyone's work schedule. Don't get bogged down by the fact, and I'm just going to throw this out there because I hear it so often. Oh, well, he always works till 7. He's never going to show up, because guess what? A lot of times people can shift their work schedule around almost by magic. And it is for your child's benefit to see the other parent, even if it's annoying to you in most circumstances. Not in every circumstance, but in many circumstances. So you want to make a plan that's clear, that's consistent, even if it's consistently inconsistent, which is to say, even if you decide, okay, week 1, the children are with me Monday, Tuesday, and with dad Wednesday, Thursday, and we alternate on the weekends. And week 2, they're with dad Monday, Tuesday, and with me Wednesday, Thursday, and we alternate, the weekend, whatever. But it will follow a pattern. You want it to be consistent. You want it to be clear. You want it to be so that the child understands it, and you want to minimize conflict. So a lot of lawyers get really bogged down in the number of transitions for the child. But transitions are not what harms the child. What harms the child is conflict and a lack of some sort of order, right? Because children need to be raised in a sense of safety, in some sort of container. So that does not mean it has to be like traditional nuclear family container. It just means it needs to be in an environment where the children know that they're loved, that they are cared for, and that they are safe. And so the more conversations that you can have with your ex about maintaining some semblance of regularity for the kids, is the best, right? Obviously, as you go forward in your life and you may recouple with different people who have different ways of parenting, they're going to be a bit different in each of the household. But the more that you guys can come together, the more consistency that you can create, the better you're going to serve your children for their future.
I love that. I love that so much that you put that in there about conflict is the thing that really hurts the child more than anything. A more stable environment. I mean, don't they just thrive?
They do. And you know what? Don't worry. If you have an ex who's just impossible or they don't even see their ex, there's a lot of research that shows that having a stable, secure relationship with just one parent is all that any child needs. I mean, think of all the people who have babies who are not married or not coupled, right? So like, even if you did not envision that for yourself, the more work you can do to be okay with the fact that this is the way it is for your child or children and let go of your guilt that you might be experiencing, the better gift you're giving to yourself. Because the fact of the matter is your children have that life whether you feel bad about it or not, right? So the messaging that you're sending the children is going to tend to be more positive. If you feel better, they're going to feel better.
Yes, that's it. Because they pick up on your energy. You know, I was having this conversation with someone the other day about how, you know, even if your words are positive and even if your intention is for them to not feel what you're going through, they'll pick up on your body language and they will pick up on these little nuances, these little in-between things that you're not even aware that you're doing.
Totally.
Yeah. And then they feel everything, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
So now I have one last question for you and then we're done.
Okay.
Okay. So this is specifically for people who are heading into this situation. So what questions should we be asking our lawyer at the very first interview?
Oh gosh, so many. I think I have a section of that in Better Apart, but so you need to make sure that you have a really good dynamic with your lawyer, that you trust them. That's the most important thing, because if you don't trust your lawyer, it's really hard to feel good about what happens. You don't want to be second guessing your choices. And as the lawyer, I never want to work with someone who doesn't have full faith in me, because it really undermines the ability to practice well. You really want to pick somebody who specializes in family law, because if you pick the family lawyer who's really a criminal lawyer, they're going to miss things. They're going to argue about, they're going to tend to focus on things that they don't need to worry about and miss things that they should be paying attention to. You want someone who really knows what they're doing. You also need to know yourself. You know, how much communication do you need? Do you want to go to mediation? Is that the right thing for you? Do you need someone who's just the bulldog because you know the other person's hiring a bulldog, and maybe you just get a divorce coach who can work with the bulldog who's also a smart, caring person? You know, you need to know your situation and know your dynamic. You want someone who's going to return your calls. You need to ask questions when you go in for the first interview. Find out how the process is where you live. Find out what the child support should turn out to be, more or less, given your financial situation. If child support's appropriate, or alimony, or maintenance. How does the property distribution work? How does inheritance work? I mean, there's so much. Yeah. But the bottom line is, if you have to pick two things, make sure that the person really knows family law, and that they're communicative, and that they're respected.
Right. And that they're respected. That's absolutely essential, because you don't know. I mean, you'll only know so far in as what they show you as you're going along. Like, you're not going to really know what they're capable of until you're in the courtroom with them. So
until you're at the negotiation table with them.
Yes.
Everybody has a different skill set. So that's why it's important. Like, if you have an agreement to stay out of court, you don't need to hire that pit bull. That pit bull tends not to be as good at negotiation. right? Like they're just not. That's not what they might be able to negotiate, but that's not like really where they shine.
Right. This has been absolutely amazing. Gabrielle, you're so awesome.
Thank you so much.
You've given us all so much to work with and think about. And I think people are going to be listening to this nonstop forever.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you so much. It's really been a lot of fun.
Oh, this is awesome. Now, lastly, you wanted to talk a little bit more about launching your Better Apart Masterclass. And I know that if everybody goes to your website, GabrielleHartley.com, they can go there to join the waitlist. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. There's a little opt-in, 5 tips or 10 tips for a drama-free divorce, and they can just put their name. I won't share your website or anything, your email information with anybody. It's just for my list. And when the masterclass comes out, you can hop on there, and it's going to be super easy to access, and it hopefully will be fun to engage in. And there'll also be one in a little bit about parenting specifically. So yeah, and then there'll be group chats and all kinds of fun stuff.
That's amazing. You're a really fun person. I think this is going to be amazing, and I cannot wait to see it all come to fruition.
Thank you so much. Same to you.
That's awesome. Thank you again, Gabrielle. Thank you to everybody who's listening. Again, you are listening to Thriving After Divorce Radio Podcast. I am your host, Tanya Marie Dubé, and we will see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you again so much for joining us on the Thriving After Divorce Radio Podcast. We're coming to you every Monday morning so that you can start your week with intention and some powerful advice for what you're dealing with. So please subscribe to this podcast and share it with your friends and your family. My goal is to help change 1 million lives with this work, because when you teach a woman, you teach an entire community. Everybody benefits and the love spreads. So please feel free to comment, review, share, and like. With your help, I know I can reach this goal. So have a beautiful day, and we will see you next week.